This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, we now bring you a dialogue on parliamentary elections in Bangladesh. The participants are Veena Sikri, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, Foreign Affairs Editor of Statesman.
Today we are discussing the elections in Bangladesh, and the worrisome part seems to be that there has been a lot of violence accompanying the elections, before the elections, and the main opposition party has also referred to this election as a scandalous farce. What do you make of this entire thing which is going on in Dhaka?
Well, I must say that I'm glad that the elections have finally taken place, although I believe the voter turnout has not been too high. This is a reaffirmation of the democratic process in Bangladesh. And I think that the opposition, both the BNP and the Jamaat-e-Islami, they were really exploiting the democratic process for their own benefit. Now, if you look at the two issues which brought these two main opposition parties on the street, one issue was the one raised by the BNP about the abolition of the caretaker government system, the CTG system. Now, there are 2 points here. First of all, the CTG system was really used only for 2 elections. One was the June 1996 election, and the second was the 2001 election. First election was won by Sheik Hasina, the second one by Khaleda Zia. By the time the third election came up, the 2006 election, the CTG system had already lost its credibility because under Prime Minister Khaleda Zia, she tried to tweak the system, change the retirement age of the Supreme Court Chief Justice so that a person whom she wanted to be could become the CTG chief. This led to a lot of loss of credibility, and in fact that person, the individual concerned, did not. He declined the post eventually. Subsequently, under a separate reference to the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, the Supreme Court declared the CTG system unconstitutional because it has a unelected person as the head of the government, which under the parliamentary democracy is unconstitutional. So these were the two issues, nothing to do with Sheik Hasina, that actually brought the CTG system to an end. What Sheik Hasina as Prime Minister did was to bring in the constitutional amendment which abolished the system and went back to the regular practice of parliamentary democracy. Now, having said that, there were a lot of talks and efforts to bring the parties together, including one very infamous conversation between the two, between Prime Minister Sheik Hasina and the former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia. But this did not work because the opposition party said, as long as Sheik Hasina is there, we will not take part. Now, this is neither credible nor democratic to say that because a particular person is not there. So I think this effort to destroy the democratic processes, democratic institutions in Bangladesh by coming on the street has really been very unfortunate. The second process which combined with it was what the Jamaat-e-Islami was doing, which is to oppose the war crimes trial. The war crime trial process was started by Prime Minister Sheik Hasina. She had promised it in the last election. There was a great deal of public support for it. Even the young people who had not even been born in 1971 willing to come out on the streets in a non-violent way to support the war crime trial. Again, there is a misconception that the Jamaat-e-Islami was banned by Sheik Hasina. It's not so. The Jamaat-e-Islami 2008 elections conducted under the army-backed caretaker government, they had started looking at the constitution of each of the political parties. And when they looked at the constitution of the Jamaat-e-Islami, they found that this constitution is not in keeping with the constitution of Bangladesh. So they were asked in 2008 to change their constitution and bring it in line. They promised to do so, they did not do so. And so this time, for these elections, they have been not allowed to participate in the electoral process. They remain a social organization. Now, in anger against this, in anger against the war crime trial, in anger against the execution of one of those convicted in the war crime trial, Abdul Qadir Mullah, all of this brought them on the street, and a kind of violence for the last several months in Bangladesh, never seen in Bangladesh since 1971. So this has led to a real deterioration of the democratic process. So I'm glad that the elections have taken place. Now that they have taken place, I hope the process of reconciliation and talks will continue and that it will strengthen the democratic process in Bangladesh.
But people are already saying that we might have a re-election in Bangladesh in maybe a year, since a lot of seats were uncontested and the Awami League seems to have won more than half the seats uncontested.
That, I think, up to Sheik Hasina, it seems, as you said quite rightly, that her party has won more than half the seat already, which are uncontested, and so they can form the government. But certainly I agree with you that in this situation, if you want to strengthen democratic processes in Bangladesh, this can only be done through dialogue and reconciliation. So that process must continue. And if it continues, you ask, all right, fine, what is the process we can have? How do we bring everybody together? And if all the parties agree to participate, those who are eligible to participate, fine, another election can be held. Why not? And that again should be through a consensual process, a process of everybody coming together. That's important, I think, because in a democracy, doing it through violence and doing it by trying to change the constitution through the streets is not really a viable process.
How do you view India's reaction to the whole thing? The statement that came out of the Ministry of External Affairs was kind of playing it safe, saying we do not wish to interfere in the internal affairs, but we hope there will be an electoral process. But how do you see India handling what seems to be going to be an unstable Bangladesh?
For India, our greatest interest in Bangladesh, it's a very important neighbor, so certainly we are very interested in good relations with Bangladesh. But our greatest, beyond just good relations, our greatest interest in Bangladesh is to see a stable, prosperous, democratic and secular Bangladesh. So we will always support processes which strengthen the democratic systems in Bangladesh. We did not, that is why at all, very careful to make it appear as though we are taking sides in the election, not at all. In fact, we said that leave the decisions to the people of Bangladesh, let them decide whichever way they want. And I think India has been very fair and very correct on this process. And I think here, we really do see this as a very deciding moment in the history of Bangladesh. Yet another, Bangladesh has been a country which was born through the Liberation War in 71. It has had a number of twists and turns. 1975, Sheikh Mujib was assassinated, 15 years of military rule, 2 military dictators and so on. But now in 91, again through a peaceful process, the people of Bangladesh came back to democracy. They've had several elections, 91, 96, 2001, 2006, 2008, and that process should continue. So certainly India will support the democratic process in Bangladesh. India will support any effort for reconciliation, for dialogue. And Prime Minister Sheik Hasina has herself spoken in that favor. She has said that after the election there can be talks, there can be fresh elections. She's left everything on the table for discussion. But I think she's right in maintaining that the elections should have been held, and now they have been held, because that is an important indicator of the democratic process. If you today postpone the election because of violence on the streets, then tomorrow somebody else will bring up another point and have postponed elections for that point. That will lead finally to a constitutional crisis, a constitutional vacuum in Bangladesh. So I think it's good that the process has been gone through, and certainly the process of reconciliation should continue. Economic activity should start. The violence on the streets has destroyed economic activity in Bangladesh. Public transport, private transport, young children have lost their lives. Transport and businesses have been destroyed, burnt, arson, even polling booths have been attacked. So the worst kind of violence to prevent an election is really not good for the democratic processes in Bangladesh.
Some analysts have also referred to what is happening in Bangladesh as more of an ego clash between what you see to the Begums. You have Khaleda Zia, you have Sheikh Hasina. Do you think it's also a personality problem somewhere that is outplaying?
I don't really buy that argument. I know that even when I was High Commissioner in Bangladesh, there was this big talk of the -2 formula and do away with both the Begums. And I used to always say that I think that's a very male chauvinist approach, because if these were two men who had a difference of political opinion, nobody would say do away the two men. It's just, so I don't really accept that argument. But what I do see in Bangladesh, and this is the key point of what is happening now, is that it seems to be almost a struggle between the democratic, secular, economic development process of Bangladesh on the one hand, which Prime Minister Sheik Hasina's Awami League has been supporting, and, talking of a more Islamist government, talking of Jamaat Islami who wants Sharia law, and talking of an entirely different kind of a political regime in Bangladesh. I think that struggle is more worrisome, because the people of Bangladesh have again and again and again voted in favor of democracy, in favor of democratic development, secular government. Just as recently as the last election, 2008, they gave Sheik Hasina's Awami League a 2/3 majority on her own and 3/4 with her political allies. So I think that this struggle is what is very evident. You do find that in the statements made by some of the political parties, particularly Jamaat Islami and even some of the BNP people, this is worrisome, because in the last 5 years under Prime Minister Sheik Hasina, you have seen a lot of effort to normalize relations, have friendly relations. Indian insurgent groups are no longer supported. They don't stay in Bangladesh. They are handed over. So all this has been very positive developments which we would like to continue.
Do you also feel that somewhere the Indian establishment would also prefer Sheikh Hasina to be back? Because Khaleda Zia typically is more to the right of the center. She's more prone to a more Islamist way. Whereas with keeping in India's secularism, Sheikh Hasina maybe fits the picture a little better.
I think I would not like to put it in context of personalities, because I think in a democracy, personalities are far less important than issues, movements, what the people want. Again, I would emphasize that the democratic secular forces is what we should support. Anything that brings democracy, stability, economic prosperity that is what we should support in Bangladesh, and I think that's what we have been doing. And I think that it is quite fair to say that India has given the same importance to Bangladesh under all Prime Ministers. We have not distinguished, even when Prime Minister Khaleda Zia was there, we did our best to develop the relationship with Bangladesh. A lot of talks, dialogue, all times we have tried that. Even when you see the Ganga Waters Treaty, it was concluded, yes, Sheik Hasina was the Prime Minister there, but in India you didn't have a Congress government at that time. You had Prime Minister Deva Gowda was here. So under all regimes, all governments on both sides, the effort between the two countries has succeeded when they've had this commonality of interest in having a democratic, secular society. And in fact, you can see the negative effects because in what has been happening in Bangladesh in the last 2 months, they have been attacking the minorities. The violence in the streets, the violence in the rural areas has really been targeting minority populations, the Buddhists in the Sichuan Hill Tract region, the Hindus in west region of Bangladesh, Satkhira and so on. And this has been very worrisome and people have already started moving across the borders. So obviously India would like Bangladesh to remain as a stable, secular, democratic country.
Khaleda Zia has also protested that she's been put under house arrest. It's varying reports. We have some reports which are saying that she's not really under house arrest. There are some reports coming out of Dhaka which say that actually she's been restrained from coming out and addressing rallies. So given the situation, if this report was to be true, we were to take her statement that she's not being allowed movement, how do we expect the democratic movement then to go forward? She is the main opposition leader. She's not being allowed to come out of her house. She alleges to even address rallies now.
But the point is that she is the one who's called for the hartals. She is the one who's called for a public movement to come and stop the elections. So I think one has to see that in the proper context in any democratic country. If you make seditious statements, then the government of the day is fully entitled to take whatever appropriate action they consider. I don't think there's any question of house arrest or anything like that. But actually, it is entire nation of Bangladesh, their economic activity is stopped. Nobody is allowed to come out on the streets because of the call for hartal, and those who have come out have faced the most brutal violence. The Jamaat-e-Islami, they cut tendons, they harm people, young children have lost their lives. So I think that this whole atmosphere of using violence, the cruelest and the most vicious kind of violence to stop democratic activity is something that should be really stopped. India also at one time used to have a lot of these, still have in West Bengal some hartals and so on. But this tendency to utter violence, this has really gone down because nobody in India accepts it. The people don't. They don't like it. The moment you try to use violence, you get a negative reaction. So I think it's the same thing in Bangladesh. It's very interesting that when I think some of the leaders of the opposition parties, including Jamaat, they found out that the public response to their call for hartal and band was very negative. They were really angry with the violence and stopping of schools and stopping of so on. So then you found this whole counter propaganda coming out. Oh, but you see, I'm myself under house arrest and so on. So I think that now that the elections have been held, it is best to restart the process of dialogue and reconciliation. And I hope that all the political parties will respond. So you can really have a discussion and see what can be done.
Where do you see Bangladesh headed in the near future? We are going to now have a kind of election which people are going to raise questions on. It's going to be unstable. India is there watching. Do you see the violence coming to some kind of a end or receding? And how do you politically see, is there going to be more stability, more instability? Where and what should India do? In short, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what do you think is going to be the future of Bangladesh, say, in the next 6 months?
I hope that the violence will stop because now that the election process is complete and some kind of stability should be there once the election results are declared. Yes, somebody may still protest the election results and so on. But if there is a call for dialogue, all the political parties to come to the table, I hope that that call will be respected and the people will understand the importance of that call. I mean, all right, somebody may say, but the voter turnout was low. Come and discuss it. Yes, okay, let's have another election. But let's have it under the terms and whatever is there in the Bangladesh constitution. That's the point, isn't it? That it should be something that is a consensus and something that is in keeping with the Bangladesh constitution. That is important. And I think if economic activity resumed in Bangladesh, people are allowed to go to work, if schools start, you will find normalcy returning. And you will find people calming down. That's very important, to calm the situation and to have talks so that you can have, again, the democratic institutions being strengthened.
And with this, we bring the discussion to an end. Thank you.
You were listening to a dialogue on parliamentary elections in Bangladesh. The participants were Veena Sikri, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, Foreign Affairs Editor of Statesman. It came to you in the program News Analysis, produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.